This is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another RPG story time. This time we're going to take a look more at like a mix of a rules commentary, but there will be stories to keep it from being a tabletops and taverns entry. So the other day, and this all starts the other day, I was actually looking to develop and run a Pathfinder scenario, which was very, very survival based, very gritty, very low magic. Basically, survival in a dungeon complex, so all the resources were limited. And I was actually looking through existing Pathfinder rules for equipment, like equipment degradation rules. Things like, say in Oblivion or something, the computer game, where as you use your equipment it degrades and you have to take some time out to repair it or it breaks, that sort of thing. It wasn't something that I absolutely had to include, but I thought I'd take a look to see if there was anything like that on the books. And it occurred to me that what I already that I was looking for, while it may not have existed in that form, there were already that was already something that was very similar to that in the Pathfinder rule set, although not breakage from use so much, but overall item breakage. And Pathfinder and 3.5 both had this very, very detailed out, in that you have Sunder rules, which are when you attack an item and you thereby damage it, or just general item damage rules, wherein you know, if somebody's not holding the item, then you can just try to break it, and you do this whole thing where you roll damage against hardness, etc. 5th edition doesn't necessarily have the Sunder rules per se, but it does have damaging an item rules, which are very similar. And I thought, well, you know, if I can't really, I don't really want to do, at the end of the day, I decided I really didn't want to do the whole tracking item damage and such on a use basis. But the whole sundering and otherwise attacking items was fair game. And then, there's a couple reasons why you'd want to do something like this. First of all, is as I said, in a low magic, low resource game, it gives you a more gritty, survivalistic feel to things. People have to really watch, or else their own weapons and gear may break, and they may not immediately have access to it. And in a way, it's almost better to do it with sunders or item damage itself, because that way things are unpredictable. You don't necessarily know that you can get X number of uses out of a particular item, a particular weapon, a particular shield, or whatever. Instead, it's more unpredictable. It depends entirely on whether it was targeted by an attack, whether you fail to save and the item is damaged thereby, etc., etc. But even though I kind of put this as a focus for a low magic, low resource game, it's also useful in a normally powered game, because if the characters are in a long haul adventure, they may not necessarily be able to go back to town to replace certain items. And if you include monsters or NPCs that attack their equipment, it's liable that they're going to be going up against many creatures. And in general, a lot of these creatures that you'll encounter in a Pathfinder game or a similar game will mostly rely on damaging attacks. But if they're part of an army and they know that they're probably going to fall to the character's blades, and there's a ton of their buddies waiting to take their place, why wouldn't they try to make the most of things, and instead of attacking the characters, try to break their sword or their shield or whatever? And that would kind of make it easier for their companions to then attack the characters. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I've used this thing in the past, not necessarily in a more modern system, but I believe in 3.5 I was using this sort of technique in one dungeon. And interestingly enough, it worked out real well. Now, most modern characters, most people that play modern characters, in fact, most people that play any role-playing game at all, will generally spend all of their characters' money, all of their characters' resources on one really good set of gear. Usually a set of magic gear, sometimes magical and non-magical gear mixed together. And the thing about Sunder rules and such is that even though magic items in general are harder to damage, they're not usually impossible to damage. They may be tougher than the normal weapons and so on and so forth, but when they are damaged, it's that much more expensive to replace them or to repair them a lot of times. And so you end up having damage to gear be a resource sink even without tracking the normal degradation rules. And as an example, I want to bring up the game that I'd mentioned where this had happened. As a DM, I was running it, and that was a place that I called Skarak's Den, which was basically an orc-themed dungeon. It was an orc lair. And when I first started it, we had a group, and they had like a paladin, a fighter, a cleric, and a thief. I don't think they had any arcane people at that time. They'd skip the arcane people. It was mostly like frontline fighters and, the rogue, who was themselves a frontline fighter. And what had happened is they went into this dungeon. They went into this orc den, and I started off pretty standard. Enemies would attack them. Sometimes they used extra tactics or whatever, but in general, is a very straightforward melee. And I was getting a little bit frustrated a couple rooms in because their fighter had really, really specialized in shield and defense and all that. And so he was running up front and blocking pretty much all of the orcs' attacks until the rest of the party clashed with him. So he'd have the fighter run in, defensive, with a shield, with shield specialization, and so on and so forth. And I was just unable to get the initial shock that these orcs required in order to actually do decent damage to this party. So around room 3 or room 4, I was like, you know what? I got to take that shield down. Not necessarily the fighter, but just that shield down. Because if the shield's down, he'll lose a certain amount of AC just from not having the shield. But he'll also have a couple of his feats at the time. Forget which feats he had. It's been a while. Would no longer be as effective as they were. So the next room, I had... there were like 4 orcs in it. They went up and attacked. They put their bows and stuff down and went up and charged, and they went ahead and attacked the shield instead of the character. And this kind of took the group back. And it was interesting because even though that first round of combat didn't take out that character's shield, it was the first time that I'd seen this group genuinely be worried about anything for like 2 or 3 adventures straight. And this look just came over their faces. Like they just realized that they were no longer facing, just in that one round of combat, they were no longer facing enemies that were simply going to attack them and have their hit points restored. They were facing enemies that were after their gear, and that was a cardinal sin. Now, they killed those orcs with prejudice, trying to take them down as quickly as possible, and then walked into the next room. And the next room actually only had 1 orc in it, but it was an orcish barbarian. And so again, I have the barbarian go into a rage. I have him run up to the fighter, and this time, this orc just demolishes the fighter's shield in 1 hit. And that all of a sudden changed the tone of the adventure, because first of all, the fighter had some of his feats working at a lower, at a generally lower effectiveness. He was missing some AC, and more importantly, he'd been denied some of his hard-bought gear. It was just a normal shield, but damn, that shield was his, and he did not want to go ahead and let it go. But he had no choice, because now the shield was broken. And they proceeded through that dungeon, in a different manner than they had the prior dungeons. It went from how shall we steamroll this next room to how are we going to approach it where we can be effective without risking too much of our own resources. And it changed things like flipping a switch. These people all of a sudden realized it was on. It was serious. Not only with that, but they were, besides being more cautious, they were also genuinely angry that, these orcs broke our stuff. How dare they? And they just went through the rest of the cave like that. And I had the orcs, they weren't all sundering, but they were occasionally throwing a sunder attack in here and there in addition to their normal attack, or in amongst their normal attacks. They only broke a few weapons, but here's the thing, even stuff that wasn't broken after a sunder ended up damaged and in need of repair. And so their party tactics kind of changed. If a weapon was damaged, all of a sudden they were scrounging amongst the dead orcs to pick up their weapons to use, so they didn't risk their best weapons, and then that way they could bring out the weapons that they knew, that the masterwork weapons that they had at the time. I don't think any of them had magic items at the time, or not magic weapons, really. They had like a set of magic armor and some other stuff. But instead of risking their high quality weapons, their masterwork weapons, their weapons they had weapon focus in, they were saving that until it was necessary, until they had to take down a boss or whatever. And it really just kind of changed the thing of the entire feel of the game, to the point where the next time they went on a dungeon crawl, they invested in a solid backup set of weapons and shields. The fighter went in and he had a new shield and he had his weapons repaired, and he made a point to get a secondary short sword so he could bring it out in the event that his main sword broke. And he had a secondary shield not on him, but he went ahead and had the rogue carry it but not use it. And that way he had one ready for if the front shield broke. And while I didn't focus fire with the Sunder at all for the rest of that campaign, I did throw it in from time to time. And it really did make them think about what they were doing on each particular expedition. Furthermore, the same group, when they were playing a later game, they made sure that one of their casters had a mending spell available, and that they devoted some ranks into the craft skill so that they could repair these items themselves and they wouldn't have to worry too much about damage to their weapons. And while it took effective attacks away from, particular rooms of enemies, it did add a layer of tactical complexity to the thing. And this is not going to be suited for every game, I'm not saying that, but it really did it was like night and day. So it's something to think about, especially if you're running 3.5 or Pathfinder. Other game systems have similar item damage or item breakage effects, although not to the same extent. As I said, 5th edition doesn't really have Sunder rules in the book, by the book, but you can make certain attacks and you can attack unattended items. And here's one thing that you keep in mind, is that you can render an item unattended by disarming. If your DM's using the optional disarm rules, you can knock an enemy's shield or knock an enemy's weapon out of their grasp, and then when it's on the ground, either take it if you've got the action to do so, or if you've got like a bonus action to attack, or if somebody else in your group has the ability to attack, you can smash the weapon on the floor and thus deny the enemy, your opponent, their weaponry in a long-term basis. And I haven't actually had a chance to do that yet as a player, because quite frankly I don't get to play 5th edition a lot. I usually get to run it. But recently I did something very similar where the big bad showed up with this obviously enchanted magic weapon, and I had my fighter run up and disarm them and then grab the weapon as the manipulate an item and run as the rest of their move. And the big bad was just sitting there going, what just happened? Did I really just get my big magic axe. It just got taken away. And it was funny because the dungeon master had said, yeah, you can use a disarm maneuver and whatever, but he wasn't expecting it to pass. And he was just taken aback at the idea that his big villain just got disarmed and had their item taken away from him just like that. And it's something I kind of want to try out. As I play more games, I'm going to try out the whole disarm and attack if I'm using two weapons, or disarm and then tell somebody else to attack the weapon kind of thing, just to see how many items I can bust up. And this actually, and that concludes that story a little bit, but this actually brings to mind a character build that I made and played once back in 3.5 edition. And that was basically what I call the Sunder McSunderson build. And it's ridiculous, I know, but it was basically a barbarian whose sole purpose in life was to break things. And he was very effective at breaking enemy weapons and shields right off the bat. But I only ever got to play him once because we'd gone through an adventure with a group that I was with at that time, and we went through the adventure and I broke so much stuff with this barbarian that it ended up leaving very, very little in terms of actual loot to carry on the rest of the group through. And the rest of the group actually turned on me and said, "You're not playing that character again." And the DM was laughing their ass off at that time because he didn't really expect that much usable loot to be shattered before the party could even get a hold of it. And I looked at all these people around the table just going at me, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to get in a fight. You guys are right. I'm going to retire this character. But it was fun while it lasted, and thus ended the Sunder McSunderson build. And I believe he actually had Shatter Spike, which is a 3rd edition unique weapon that was later added, or was it added in 3rd edition? I know it came with, it supposedly came with the Sunless Citadel, which means actually, now that I think about it, it's now a 5th edition weapon because it's in Yawning Portal. So if you're going to make a Sunder build, that might be an option for you. Do Yawning Portal, grab Shatter Spike or whatever, and go break some stuff. So, yeah, as a player, it's not quite so good because you want to be able to salvage weapons, and breaking an enemy's magic weapon as a player is not too great if you're intending to use that magic item yourself. But as a dungeon master, as a game master, there is no better. Well, there's a couple better ways, but targeting your player's gear is an instant way to get them angry, to change their tactics, and to change their view of the entire game. Especially if you do it not necessarily as your sole tactic, but as one of several tactics. So, that's food for thought. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. This is a short one. I just thought I'd share that little bit of knowledge. Actually, I'm kind of looking for other ways to get. I know I go on a lot about old school gaming, and I enjoy old school gaming, but every so often I like to run a really simulationist style game, especially in a low magic setting. So right now I use Pathfinder by necessity just because it has a lot of subsystems that support that. AD&D First Edition does as well, but not to the same extent. And if you've got any ideas on a game that works really well at low fantasy levels, that can give you that sort of really hardcore survival, scrabbling for resources kind of feel, let me know in the comments below. I'm always interested in those. And even if this video stays up forever, well, it won't stay up forever, but if it stays up for a long time, then at least other people will let me know, or at least other people that view it later can take a look at that list that comes up if they want to see the same thing. Anyway, I'll go ahead and let you guys go here. This has been the RPG Crawler with RPG Storytime. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.